am a wife and a mother and an insurance agency owner, a friend, and a PTA advocate. I am so excited to talk about all of the things that I find most precious here within our community, within our lives, and within our faith, friendships, and relationships. Here on Heather's Most Precious. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Heather's Most Precious. I am especially excited for y'all to join us as we are embarking on a new series. This will be all about education. Our goal during this is going to be to bridge the gap between the classroom and the community. We will do this by exploring conversations with teachers of every grade level. We will also talk to school psychologists. We will talk to superintendent, principal. I am just so excited for us to learn together, for us to learn how teachers need to be supported at different stages of your student's career, as well as how in our communities we can come alongside them to provide materials that they may need inside the classroom to better your students' education. And most importantly, how to approach certain conversations if you have concerns or questions, especially when it comes to our most precious possessions, which are our children, right? We want to make sure that we are doing that in the most professional way and in the way that gets us the best result. So come join us, sit back, relax as we begin this educational series. And we are going to start out with Miss Leigh Grady, a local elementary school teacher here in Chattanooga. And I am just super, super pumped about this. Welcome, Leigh.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, Leigh and I go back quite a bit of ways. She does teach at the elementary school that one of my sons is still at, and Laker has already moved through. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have been a teacher for 20 years. I took a little break when my children were born. I have taught pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and fifth grade. The only grade I haven't taught is fourth, and my sweet spot is third grade. I'm married to Jeff. We've been married almost 25 years. We have two beautiful children. Blake is a junior at UTK and Emma's a freshman at UTK. So I always like to say my children and my money go to the University of Tennessee.
That is awesome. So I know you said about 20 years. What was it like to have taught and then left to raise your children and then come back into a classroom? I know a lot probably changed.
Right. So I started teaching in the 1900s. I mean, because really, it was 1997 was my first teaching position. And it's a lot different. I had quite a bit of experience in private school. I taught 2 years at our church, and then I taught 5 years at a private Christian school in Knoxville, and it is a lot different. But when we moved back in 2015, my goal was to go back to private school because I had two children that were getting ready to be middle and high school, and it didn't work out that way. And it was a God thing that I ended up at East Brainerd Elementary School. I walked in for my interview, and the assistant principal at the time that was going to interview me, I knew from childhood. And so it was a very easy, seamless interview. I've been at East Brainerd. This is my 8th year. I feel like it's my mission field. I feel like I'm teaching in my community. I feel like those are the kids that need a great teacher. And so, but it has changed a lot. Even in the 8 years that I've been in the classroom, COVID did a lot of changes.
Yes.
But I always feel like we're changing and growing forward, not going backwards.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, I'm going to rewind us back a little bit. I would make a really cool rewind noise, but that would not go well. Thank you. Thank you for saving me. What did you always, even as a little girl, decide that you were going to be a teacher or have that desire? Or what caused that?
So what's really cool is when I was growing up, my mom stayed home to raise my sister and my dad was a pharmacist. And what's even cooler than that is both of my parents were teachers. But they were secondary. They were high school teachers. And when I graduated high school, I went to college to be a pharmacist because that's what my daddy did. It's what I knew. And it was my freshman year, and I went to Stanford University in Birmingham, and I was not doing so well. And I'd always been a straight A student, and I was very confused by chemistry. That's all pharmacy is chemistry. And I remember calling my parents, and I said, I'm not making a good grade. I'm worried. I'm not sure this is the path I need to go on. And I said, what am I going to do? And they said, well, you've always worked with children, which is true. I'd always babysat. I worked at the YMCA day camp. I worked at Primrose Preschool. Like, I was always drawn to children. And so that's where education became my passion. I thought I was actually going into pharmacy more for the money. And then I completely took a turn and went into a passion versus something for financial gain. I mean, my gain is different than financial. Of course. I gain much more than any dollar amount can put on.
Absolutely. And I want to know, what is the most shocking story that you have in all of your years teaching, whether it was a parent or a student in your classroom or maybe something from college? I don't know.
Shocking in a bad way, or like, I can't believe that happened?
Anything.
So my first year at East Brainerd Elementary, I had a student that struggled, and he decided it would be a good idea to hit me. And he hit me as hard as he could 3 times. And I remember just being in shock. I had never been struck as a teacher. And I do feel bad for that child because it was brought on because of either a misunderstanding or, whatever. But it was pretty shocking. And I remember I had to go get checked out for OJI because they needed to make sure he didn't break anything, which he didn't. He's 8. Yeah. If he had broken me, that would have been bad. Right. But I remember the principal calling me the night that it happened and check on me and said, if you feel like you need to take tomorrow off, I understand. And I said, no, absolutely not. Those other children that saw this happen need to see that I am a champion and I'm coming back in and I'm going to do my job. And I did. And it was hard. I cried, but
I bet.
But, I was shocked, but then now I'm not shocked. If that happens, I'm not shocked by that anymore. Okay. I'm prepared. Yeah.
Did that shadow kind of the way that were you fearful then of that happening again? Or did you, was that just kind of like, okay, another notch in my belt?
No, well, I don't think I was fearful. The child ended up being removed from the school for a little bit. And when he came back, clearly he didn't come to my classroom. He went to another classroom. And I really struggled when I first, saw him back in the building, not because I was fearful, but then I realized he's a kid.
Right.
He's a kid and he needs to be forgiven. And I forgive him. And that doesn't mean I'm going to go, get buddy with him. But, I think that it opened my eyes for sure. And I also think it made me more aware of my actions because whatever I did prior to triggered him. He didn't just out of the blue come at me. And so I'm a little bit more cognizant of my actions and how I could possibly trigger a child. I have to just be more thoughtful of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've taught many, many years. And as you've said, your passion, which is phenomenal, I will say, to those joining us today, Miss Grady is one of the most fabulous teachers that I've seen because of the way that you engage with your children in your class, but also their families, whoever wants to engage, but you're also trying to lead teachers. You constantly have student teachers so whether it's up and coming, whether it's your partner teachers, right?
Right.
Or co-teachers. I always do that. Not correctly.
Yeah. Partner teachers.
Yeah. But whatever that looks like, you always embrace and challenge and want to grow. And it's, I love that. It's really a joy to see.
Thank you.
And if you would ask my children, they would have always said,
"Oh, yes. I love yes." Every day I get a big old hug from him. I love him.
That is awesome. What what is your favorite thing about being able to host student teachers in your classroom and have a kind of an impact on them?
Right. I've had some student teachers that struggled a little bit, and unfortunately, there was probably not a lot of influence that I had on them that was going to change their mindset. But then I've had some really amazing ones. And I kind of treat them like my children, like my daughter. Like I've only had female student teachers, but if I had a male, that'd be great too. But I just kind of take them under my wing and show them that there's joy in our job. I'm kind of the teacher that just wants, I want to be fun. But I also have very, very determined expectations. And my student teachers fall under that. But I love to see student teachers thrive, and I love to see them succeed. But I also like to see them fail, because in that failure, that's where they're going to grow the most. Okay. And when we get finished with a lesson and they've taught it, they're like, oh, what? That was terrible or whatever. I'm like, yeah, it kind of was, but that's okay, because if you didn't fail some of the time, then you would never grow. And so I think just having that relationship with them. And I'm not going to lie, I do like to be able to go to the bathroom when I need to. Yeah. And when you have a student teacher, you can do that. It's important. Yes, it is a perk.
That's awesome. Now, with East Brainerd, which you've now been at
8 years. Yeah.
Long time.
It is.
We, for those of you who don't know, East Brainerd Elementary is the largest footprint in all of Hamilton County, and it's an elementary school. So we've got pre-K to 5th grade. And I mean, it's
huge.
A really big school.
Yes, it's huge.
What would you say is something that maybe many people have perceived about East Brainerd that either may not be true, or that you wish that they did know about our community?
Well, one of the things I think is, if you say the East Brainerd Elementary, they'll go, oh, that's the brand new big school with the solar system. Like, they see that from the road because it's always lit. And there is an assumption that the surrounding neighborhoods that are really big, all those kids go there. And so they just think that, and I like to tell them how school zones work. And it encompasses a much larger range than $1 million homes. Right. And that's the part I love about our school, because there is such a mixture of ethnicities, of income, everything. And what is so amazing about that to me is that that's life. Right. You're not going to go through life and only be around people that look like you and have the same amount of money as you. And so I think for me, it shows that kids are compassionate to every situation. And, there are children in wheelchairs at our school. There are children with disabilities that you can see outwardly and that you don't see outwardly. And I feel like there's compassion within that. So I love to just say, yes, we are that big, giant school, the solar system, that encompasses a really wide zone of children that come from apartments, that come from smaller neighborhoods, that come from extended stays. And all of those children are getting the same education as everybody else. Right. And I love that.
Yes. It's been a huge, the diversity, I think, is a huge, definitely probably the biggest positive piece of our school.
I agree.
I remember a few years ago when we were asking, I think they surveyed the number of languages that were spoken in the homes of our students. It was something crazy, like 57 or something wild, the different dialects. And I know last year when our PTA did the Passport to BTA, and we did learning about different schools and having the parent or countries, goodness, but having parents come in and speak if they've lived. Right. And our lesson, when we landed in India, and we're able to see all the parents that came to support and the families that either still had family there or had recently moved over. And just how neat that is, that I know that my children would not be who they are without being shaped from the neighbors that they have in their classroom, right?
Absolutely.
Classmates and teachers that have been, and we do a really cool thing in the spring, the International Festival.
Yes, that's one of my favorite. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that.
And that has been several years that's been
Celebrate the diversity. Celebrate your culture. Be proud of where you've come from.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I really love that. That's one of the things that I love about our school is the diversity. And when children get to say, oh, when we're studying the continents and they say, oh, my family is from, Asia or Africa. And then it starts communication. And then when kids who've just never left East Brainerd get exposed to that, it excites them.
It does. Yeah. And I think too, being able to be proud of where you are. Right. So we have engagement nights.
Yes.
And that can be a literacy or math or around a school fair, whatever that looks like. Tell us what that looks like when we do the International Festival, how that's kind of set up through the school.
So each grade level gets to choose a country, and you have a table, and you can choose. It's very free to do whatever you want. So in the past, we have done samplings of foods that are unique to that country. We've done games where we've taught the students that come through how to play the games. But what I love the most about our culture fair is it opens it up for parents to be involved. And it's not just the teachers running the show. It's these parents that I remember one year a family cooking, oh goodness, it was a Hispanic family, and they cooked this enormous amount of food and brought it in, and there was nothing left at the end of the night because it was so good and so, everybody was so excited about it. And so I just love that it bridges community, the families, as well as the students and the teachers. And it's really cool.
It is. It is. That is, I would agree, one of the best parts of our community. What is one of the challenges that you face being a teacher? I know you teach third grade now, but just in today's day and age, what is something that you face?
Unfortunately, the biggest challenge is class size. I'm sitting right now at 24 students, which that's literally all the room I have for. Like there's another desk could not fit in my classroom. Right. Another body could not fit in my classroom, but yet it still could happen. But not just the quantity of students. Each student has their own set of limits and their own way that they learn. And my goal as a teacher is to reach each student where they are. And it takes a lot of work. We have different ways that we can see where their struggles lie with the iReady testing or with benchmarks, things like that. So we have this data, but it's finding the time to take the data and figuring out what you need to do to close gaps. And so unfortunately in the third grade, you need to read on a third grade reading level in order to be successful. And we've got children reading on kindergarten level, first grade, second grade level, for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons that could be, but that's not ideal. And I think because there are so many children in my classroom, for example, it's hard for me to meet their needs. And there are many days I don't necessarily feel defeated, but I feel like if I had just had another hour, or if I had just had another set of hands, or if I had just had another couple of chairs that I could put around my table, I could have met their needs. But I don't look at that as a failure. I look at that as there's room for growth the next day. And I go into my next day going, okay, what can I do differently to meet those children's needs? But I think it's just sheer quantity and it's also just diversity of abilities.
Absolutely.
So I think there should be 2 teachers in every classroom.
And especially when you start to deal with discipline issues. Right. Like that takes you away. I remember even as a child, I went to a pretty big elementary school myself. I was in 4th grade and my parents pulled me out halfway through the year and I ended up being homeschooled. I would get done with my work in 2 hours. Right. Because there were no distractions. And I was shocked by that. Right. Now that was just for a few months because they were building another elementary school that I ended up going to 5th grade year, but I was shocked by that. And you think about the time that, if you could have the time back that you spent telling people to, hey, nope, we're on this assignment. Please be quiet. Please do what you say. Johnny, put your feet on the floor. All of those things how much more educational time would you have?
Exactly.
Or time
so
to
much
encourage
more.
or celebrate or
Right.
whatever.
There would be so much more time. So much more time. So,
Is there something that if you could encourage families in order to either engage with you in a way, or if there was a way that they could support you in your classroom as you are dealing with 24 students, what would that look like?
So my biggest conversation I would have with parents is to, this sounds really trivial, but check their agenda, because in their agenda every single day we write, you know, if there's homework, if there's a special date coming up, if, you know, whatever it needs. And that's like a communication between the teacher and the child, or the parent, but it's also teaching the students responsibility of writing down what their assignments are and holding them accountable.
Right.
So the first step would be obviously to look at that, because that's where notes go back and forth. The second thing is to be available. Class Dojo is a great tool that we use at East Brainerd Elementary. It's kind of like text messaging, but to an app. And so I really appreciate when I send a message to someone, to a parent, that in a timely manner they message me back, because I'm also very timely. Because if you ask me a question, if it's something I can answer right away, I will. So I really think that communication. The third thing would be involved in your child's schoolwork. Help them with their homework. Don't just send them off to the corner to do it and assume that they know how to do it. Right. Ask questions. Read with them. You know, a child's best, they will only be as good of a reader as who is reading to them. And so they learn how to read at a very young age if you read to your child. So reading to your child is huge. They learn intonation. They learn punctuation and how to pause. They learn words. They learn the joy of reading a book and listening to a book, and just being involved in their schoolwork. I think is the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that doesn't have to look like a ton of time. I know families are moving from, sporting event to after school to work to, all of the things we're maneuvering around, right, and navigating. But I know for us, when we sit down, obviously Laker kind of does his own thing now, but with Oakley, I mean, we can have it done within 20 minutes, and that's 2 or 3 days worth of the packet. Right. If we can be focused. Right. Now, I know that's hard with some of us to wrangle the children's attention, but.
Well, and the other thing I always say too is I'm a teacher that gives grace. Yeah. And if your family's having a busy week and you've got a lot going on and you don't get that homework packet done, just let me know. And I tell students that. Just have your parents send me a little note or a dojo message or write in the agenda, we didn't get to this tonight, because family time trumps homework. Of course. Every single time. That doesn't mean I'm not going to give it, but I am going to give it. It's an expectation our school and our county sets for us. But also, it's a great way to communicate what we're learning and to practice the skills that we're learning at school.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Now, let's kind of do the other toss of the coin.
Okay.
When there is a problem, maybe we know that every relationship, if there's miscommunication, as you had mentioned earlier, after getting hit, we realize that things sometimes, we don't have the full story. Right. Our perception is always skewed because it's our side. Right. So if a child goes home to a parent, says this happened, or can you believe this, or whatever, if a parent has an issue or thinks there is a concern, how would I like it to be? What would be the appropriate way for them to come to you?
So my first thing is come to me. Don't go above my head. Like, let's have that conversation first. Yes. A lot of times I'm very aware of what happens because children like to tell on each other.
Of course.
So let's pretend like an incident happened in the cafeteria and I'm not there. And somebody says, I heard Susie say a bad word. So what I do is I call them interviews, but it's really on an index card. I give them an index card and I say, if you heard Susie say anything or do anything that you thought was alarming, please write that down. So I might have a stack of 6 index cards that says Susie said a bad word. And then Susie's over here saying, I didn't say anything. Well, honey, I got 7 cards right here that said you did. And so I try to hear everybody's side. because sometimes they're like, well, she didn't do anything. And I get no cards. And so then I'm like, somebody's, maybe telling a fib. So I do the best that I can as far as finding out the truth.
Yeah.
But as far as a parent, I get your kids are your life. And you pick your child up from school and they tell you something happened. And yes, absolutely, you want to go and handle it. I always think the best rule of thumb is take a couple deep breaths and don't do anything right away. And then reach out to the teacher first. And if it does not get resolved through the teacher after you've tried, then you can bring it to the attention of administration. Right. But I feel like things can be usually handled pretty quickly and easily through the teacher.
Yes. Yeah. Now, do you think is written communication best? Is it email or Dojo, whatever platform your classroom is using, or is it a phone call?
No, I'm not a big proponent of phone calls because it's not written and it's not documented. So I could hear one thing and that person is saying something completely different.
Right.
And so I feel like Dojo message or an email or even a handwritten something in the agenda is your best bet. Also, if a parent Dojo messages me and it's a concern that they have, I can screenshot that and send that in an email to somebody that can help me solve the problem. And it's just much more efficient. It's just much more efficient. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So we all learned something, right? Like, let's go have a conversation.
Right.
Now, to the teacher that doesn't get back, then you would say, try again. And then if they don't, then go? Or does it depend on the severity of the issue?
Well, it definitely would depend on the severity. One of the things I try to remember is that all teachers are people too.
Yes.
And they carry burdens too. And they maybe not be getting back, not because they're not doing their job, but something else is happening.
Right.
I would always heed a little caution to that and say, try one more time. Yes. You could even try different formats. So let's say you emailed. And maybe that teacher's not great with her email. Maybe she doesn't have it on her phone like she does Dojo. So maybe the second attempt would be in a different way. That's what I say, to err on the side of grace and be like, that the reason you're not getting back to me is because something is going on.
Right. Or you have 24 students.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think us as parents, and you probably remember when your kids were a lot smaller than they are now.
Right.
And you want to be your kid's superhero. You want to step in.
Advocate.
Absolutely. Sure. And we should. But I also think that there is a good way to do that. And yes, remembering not only are y'all humans, just like we are.
Right.
Not everyone's as perfect as us.
That's right.
But just the way to do that, write out, hey, this is what little Susie said.
Exactly.
And I know that may not be accurate, but I'm trying to understand, because if this did happen, I'm a little bit alarmed that I am not made aware, whatever.
Right.
Can we have a conversation?
Right. Well, and to respect boundaries too.
Absolutely.
On Class Dojo, there's a setting where you can actually set your boundaries. So I don't get text message or Dojo messages after 7 p.m. and I don't get them before 7 a.m. You can send it to me. It's just not going to notify me. And so I think one of the things in our profession is balance and self-care.
Yes.
So you have to set boundaries for yourself as a professional. Mm-hmm. I struggle with that a little bit, but I'm still working on that. Leaving the school building by a certain time, or not taking all my work home, or, not putting a timeline on certain things, and say, because I also need to care for myself and take care of my family. So I think that those boundaries are good to have, but I also think open communication. Mm-hmm. The only thing I don't love about Dojo message, and kind of text message and email as well, a period can be seen, punctuation can be seen as positive or negative.
Right.
Because I put a period at the end of the sentence does not mean I'm mad.
Right.
Because I put an exclamation mark does not mean I'm happy.
Yeah.
So you can't tell the tone. And so I think that's where, if you felt like it would be better resolved through a phone call, request that. As the parent, request it. But as a teacher, request it. And so I'll make phone calls, not regularly, but if I feel like I'm not getting through to the child or to the parent, I'll just pick up the phone, because when you hear that person's voice and you go, oh, that wasn't a bad conversation.
Right.
You know,
They actually do care.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's where, if we could realize, there, I think, has only been one teacher that I've ever met that I didn't feel like had the best interest of my child.
Right.
And if you look at all of the teachers that have engaged and interacted, right? Especially as our children get older and have multiple teachers, right? Multiple periods.
Right.
That's so minimal that you should always, always give the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Have the conversation. But I think too, if you look at it as we are all on the same side, right?
Absolutely.
We are all parenting the child in one way or another.
Yes.
We want to have support. That by the classroom and the home environment being on the same page.
Team. Well, Team Oakley.
This is great.
Team Oakley means everybody on Team Oakley is to see Oakley succeed.
Yeah.
That's mom, that's dad, that's the teacher, that's the friends parents. It's all that community. And I think when you realize that, then it gives you a goal to work towards, and it helps you realize you don't have to do it by yourself.
Yes. And it's not a fight. Every time you reach out isn't necessarily that somebody did something wrong. Maybe you're calling to celebrate that they did a great act of kindness.
Exactly.
So I think also that's that being unoffended. Right. That piece. Like, let's wait to hear what they said and then decide. Right. Exactly. Now, I know that we've talked a lot about the East Brainerd Elementary, right? The school that we are at currently.
Right.
For people that are in elementary schools, period, what is the biggest difference that you see from kind of younger grades to older grades? I know we're doing a lot of the same subjects, but but what would you say, like kindergarten versus your third graders?
Well, a lot of it's responsibility. A lot of it is meeting the child where they are developmentally. I wouldn't give a big fat crayon to my third grader and say, this is what you can color with. And I wouldn't give a skinny pencil to a kindergartner and say this, you have to meet them developmentally. So each grade, each age group is going to be add on a little bit more responsibility, to where you get to the fifth grade and you shouldn't have to be reminded to take your backpack and to have your homework. Like it's all grooming them for middle school, high school, possibly college. So I feel like it's a gradual release of responsibility between the grades.
What do you feel like is the biggest, where you would notice the biggest age difference in not only responsibility, but in the
maturity?
Yeah, I would say probably maturity.
So
where does that happen?
I feel like at our school, because it's 2 levels, K1 and 2 are downstairs, 3, 4, and 5 are upstairs. It's a visual that makes sense to me. So when a child leaves second grade and walks upstairs, that's a big deal. And so when we meet with our parents at the beginning of the school year, we say, okay, you're very used to K1 and 2 report cards. They get 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is A, B, C, D, and F. You're used to your child, coloring and gluing and making crafts. That's probably not going to happen a lot in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And your child will be state tested. Now, whether I agree with that or not, we do it.
Right.
So I feel like you have to be very real in the 3rd grade with parents, explaining to them the growth going from downstairs to upstairs. And so it's a big deal. And what's so funny is students still that 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade complain about the stairs. These stairs are so hard to climb, Mrs. Grady. Why can't we just do the elevator? And I said, because you're growing. You got to grow. Yeah. And you can't grow staying on the bottom floor, and you can't grow going up an elevator. You've got to walk up the stairs. So I think that's, to me, and that's also where I've had the most experience, so between a 2nd grader and a 3rd grader.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. Now, I know we've talked about how big the school is, big classroom sizes. Is there anything that you would brag on the elementary school that you're affiliated with for doing really well? You know what? For the number of students we have, we are very effective and efficient transitioning throughout the school.
we are also really good during our drills, because when you think about it, you're in class and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. Chaos, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Not at our school. We practice, we train, we celebrate when they do a great job, we correct when they don't do a great job. And I feel like for the enormity of our enormous, whatever that word is, you know what I'm saying?
That's okay,
for that bigness of our school, we are very effective and efficient transitioning and making sure our students are safe.
That's great.
So I think that's a huge thing. And we do this thing in the hallway called 3 and 0. I actually started it. And 3 squares from the wall. So that means you're not brushing up against the wall, you're not touching it, and voice level 0. And the whole school has adopted that. And it's really made a big difference in just getting from point A to point B. And I always tell my students, you are a role model. Like these younger kids that are coming through the hallway right now, they're looking at you. So I need you to show them what it looks like to be a third grader in the hallway. So I think that we're really, really, really good at that.
Absolutely. And that allows the teacher to be heard.
Exactly.
Or if there's an emergency, all of the things, right?
And they're safe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kids, and there would be lots of opportunities for children to get hurt. Especially on the staircases, especially, in a drill sort situation, but they don't, because we really work hard at that to keep our students safe.
And that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what you intend for when you send your kid.
Absolutely.
Is there something that you feel like you as a teacher have been blamed for from outside, whether it's the student's family or other people in the community, that does not fall on your shoulders, that people think you have control over?
Goodness. Sometimes people will, and it's unfortunate that the media will get hold of our test scores or something like that, and that they grade us based on students' test scores. It's unfortunate. And I feel like, it's great to be celebrated as a level 5 school. We have been a level 5 before. We're not right now, but we're level 4. That's close. I mean,
Right.
But I feel like it should not be a reflection on the school as a whole. I do not associate a school with a number. And because there's so much more, it's like judging a book by its cover. There's so much more to that. So I think that that's probably, people will say, oh, your school, and I'm like, oh, you have no idea what our school is like. Step in and see what it's like. Don't read in the newspaper or watch on, the TV and judge our school based on a number.
Right.
So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing.
I know as parents want to be involved, a lot of them, right? Whether they work or not, they want to be in the school outside of like PTA ways or the school actually bringing in volunteers as a whole. What is something that I know when I think of kindergarten, you think of the teacher needs you to make copies and cut things so that the kids aren't cutting and glue things together, and, that increases. At the 3rd grade level, what is it? If a parent volunteer came in, what is it that you would need the most help with, or that they could assist with?
Helping the students that need the most help.
Okay.
Paperwork, to me, a lot of the paperwork that we have as teachers can only be done by the teacher. Copying, yes, anybody can do that. But we also have a pretty decent curriculum that gives us what we need for copies. We don't have to make a ton. Different grades are different, but as far as 3rd grade goes. But if a parent said to me, I would love to come in, I have an hour, I would probably find the student that needs the most help with reading and put those two together and let the child read to the volunteer, or let them do an activity with them that we're working on in class. Because if I could clone myself, I would be sitting next to every single child and helping them, not giving them the answer, but encouraging them, supporting them. And so I think that that's how I would best utilize a volunteer.
Okay. Now I want to do a couple of action items.
Okay.
So I know you have taught in both pre-K and kindergarten.
Yeah.
If there's a parent that has a preschooler getting ready for kindergarten, what are the things, the top things that you feel like they should be preparing their students with for kindergarten?
Okay. So the first thing would be writing their name. Actually, before that, knowing their name.
Yes.
You would be very surprised. So make sure your child knows their name. Make sure they know their parents' names.
Yes.
Writing their name is important. That comes with time, and there's lots of different ways they practice. But I think really just knowing who they are and being able, a lot of times it's like the address. I would do a phone number before I would do the address.
Yes.
The child either needs to know the phone number of one of the parents, or it's written somewhere they know they can go get it. Because the scariest thing to me, and this happened to me in Kohl's the other day. I was getting something and this little child just darted out from a rack, and cute as a button. And I'm looking around, don't see any parents anywhere. And I just knew that he was lost. And so I said to him, hey, you looking for your mom? And he kind of looked at me and I said, what's your name? He knew his name and he knew his mom's name. And I didn't know the phone number. But the fact that I could walk him up to the front, tell the manager, and they could come over the intercom was huge.
Big deal, yeah.
And I think his mom said I think he's either 4 or 5. she was scared. So, but I just think they need to know that. And I think honestly too, anything that you can do at home to help your child, learning their letters, their numbers, sitting in a seat for maybe 5 minutes,
maybe learning to eat lunch out of lunchbox.
Yes. Opening their own containers. Tying shoes. I mean, it's these things that we take for granted. But when you're a teacher and you've got 24 kids and everybody needs their nose wiped and their pants buttoned and their shoes tied, you won't ever get to teaching.
No.
So I just think doing this, I like to call them prerequisite skills, just things that
First
they can.
steps towards independence, right?
Absolutely.
Mama's not here. Daddy's not here. Let us do this.
Yes. And if they can't tie their shoes, buy them Velcro. I mean, there are alternatives. There are alternatives to shoestrings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what about, I know you've taught 5th grade too. What about 5th grade to 6th? That's a big deal.
Huge.
It's a big deal. I cried and my whole family made fun of me, but I'm like, this was such a big deal.
It is when you go to another school, it's a big deal.
It is. What would you say? And I know 5th graders are just too cool anyway.
I know. Right.
But what would you say parents can help their students with at that phase?
Well, it's really funny. It's kind of goes back to pre-K kindergarten, independence.
Yeah.
For example, when my children always gone to school with me. And then when they went to middle school, I wasn't in their middle school because I taught elementary school. And if they had a responsibility of making sure their lunchbox was in their backpack to go to school, when you call me from school and say, I don't have my lunchbox, that's not my problem anymore. That was your responsibility. And it stinks, like to say, you have to go eat the school lunch, or you can just wait till you get home, because you don't want that for your child. But you also don't want to be doing everything for them to where they are dependent on you. They're always going to be dependent on you. But you want them to gain independence at each level. But that independence looks different when you go from 5th grade to 6th grade. And it looks different from 8th grade to 9th grade. And it really looks different from a senior in high school to in college. And that's what I've experienced this, year. My son is a junior, but my daughter, my baby, went to college, and she's an hour and a half away. And she is very responsible and all of that. But when she called me today and she said, this class is so hard. I don't know what to do. You feel helpless. But if you've given your children the tools back when they were in high school, back when they were in middle school, back when they were in elementary school, they are going to be able to work through it. Yeah. And it's going to look different for them. So I just think independence, and that's what you raise your kids to do, and to go off and to spread their wings and do what they're called to do. So.
And allowing them to have coping mechanisms.
Yes.
How they can. And
yes.
Of course, if you always go save them, then they will never learn.
Right.
There is a consequence to the action. And
absolutely.
Oh, those are great things. I hope that for those listening that may be going through those phases or may have friends that are going through those phases, nieces and nephews, whatever that looks like, that you can help encourage them to get started. It's never too early to help prepare our students. And I think as our mama hearts as well, right? For that a little bit of separation. Lastly, if there is somebody that is either in college now wanting, kind of experiencing feelings of maybe wanting to change careers to go into teaching, change their studies, or maybe they're in a job that they're like, oh, I now hear this passion and maybe want to pursue this. What would you say to help give encouragement or advice to them?
Listen to your heart and don't listen to negativity. Because there are people out there that will say, I can't believe you do what you do. You don't get paid enough, or you don't get paid enough to deal with what you deal with. You know what? You're right. But that's not why I do what I do. I do what I do because I listen to my heart and because I knew where my gifts and talents lie. And I knew that I was called to do something much bigger than myself. So for those kids out there, you know, or you might be in your your first career now, and you think, this is not meant for me. I know a lot of people who left different jobs and went back to school to be teachers. Wow. I say, don't listen to the negativity, follow your heart, and stand up for our profession, because without our profession, there would be no other professions. No. So it starts with us. Doctors wouldn't be a doctor if they didn't have somebody to teach them to read. So you need us, and we need more people passionate about making a difference and changing lives and teaching children.
Yes. And if we're not passionate about being a teacher, be passionate about supporting our educators.
Exactly.
Encouraging
Don't be a hater. Be a supporter.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes,
that. Well, Leigh, thank you so much for joining us on our first educational
That was so
episode.
exciting.
Yes, and just being able to once again bridge that gap between the classroom and the community.
Absolutely.
And y'all, I would encourage you, wherever you are, make sure, whether it is public, private, homeschooling, support somebody who is choosing to reach out to students and to help them grow and learn. We all need each other. It does take a village, and this is the best way to do that. So we hope that you have a wonderful week, and cannot wait for you to join us next week on another episode of Heather's Most Precious.
Heather's Most Precious is brought to you with love by the Hendrickson Agency, an insurance agency serving all of Georgia and Tennessee. The Hendrickson Agency, properly protecting your most precious possessions. Support for Heather's Most Precious is provided by Study.com, which offers SAT and ACT study materials and even has resources for AP and college credit courses. Listeners of Heather's Most Precious get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level with offer code PRECIOUS. Just go to Study.com and use offer code PRECIOUS at checkout. Heather's Most Precious is produced by Chattanooga Podcast Studios and is part of the Podnooga Network. Find out more at ChattanoogaPodcastStudios.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Heather's Most Precious.